So you as a soul exist outside of this human experience, and you've chosen to bring yourself into this human reality to know yourself as a creator. Yes, you have chosen when you're going to be born. You've chosen your parents, you've chosen your birth time and location, you've chosen personal goals that you'd like to accomplish in this lifetime. You also may have selected different people you want to interact with. But more than this, you've also designed your personality.
What Lincoln just described isn't metaphor. It's a documented mechanism, a pre-birth curriculum encoded into the exact circumstances of your life. Robert Schwartz spent years decoding the soul's planning room, and what he found changes everything you think you know about suffering. Your hardest moments weren't accidents. They were arranged. Every obstacle, every teacher, every loss, chosen. Stay with this, because in about 15 minutes, what soul contracts actually are will reframe your entire existence. There is a pattern running underneath every civilization that ever produced a sacred text. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The Vedic seers encoded it. The Hermetic philosophers encoded it. The Gnostic Gospels encoded it. And the ancient mystery schools, the ones that trained initiates for decades before revealing the deepest layer, they encoded it too. The pattern is this. You are not a body that developed a soul. You are a soul that engineered a body and engineered the life inside it before you ever arrived. Robert Schwartz didn't stumble onto this casually. In 2003, he sat with a medium who described, in precise detail, the planning session his own soul had conducted before birth. The specificity stopped him cold. It wasn't vague spiritual comfort. It was architecture. Choices, agreements, entry points, contingencies, a blueprint drawn up with full awareness of what the incarnation would demand. That encounter cracked the planning room open, and Schwartz spent the next 2 decades documenting case after case, souls reviewing options, negotiating terms, selecting the exact conditions that would generate the growth they came here for. Here is the decode move that changes everything. Suffering isn't punishment. It isn't cosmic randomness. It is precision engineering. The illness that broke you open. The relationship that dismantled your identity. The loss that forced a direction you never would have chosen consciously. These weren't things that happened to you. They were things you, the deeper you, the you that exists before the veil, selected as curriculum, with intention, with full knowledge of how difficult they would be, and with a reason. This is the pattern the mystery schools protected. Not because it was dangerous, but because it requires a particular readiness to receive it without collapsing into either denial or fatalism. The initiates, who could hold it, who could look at their own suffering and say this was designed, those initiates became something different, sovereign, unshakable, awake inside the dream. Stay with me through this entire thing, because the Soul Council reveal the actual mechanism of how those contracts get negotiated before birth. That is where this transmission goes next, and it changes the architecture of everything. There is a layer beneath the life you remember, and it was active before you drew your first breath. Near-death experiencers have been describing it for decades. Across cultures, across centuries, across every possible variation of belief and background, survivors of clinical death return with a remarkably consistent account. They describe a chamber, not metaphorical, architectural. A space that feels more real than anything they encountered in physical life, populated by presences they recognize at a level deeper than memory. Some call them guides, some call them elders, some simply call them the council. And what happens inside that chamber is not what most people assume. The popular image of a life review is judgment, a divine tribunal weighing your sins against your virtues, delivering a verdict. That image is wrong. Actually, no. Let me say that more precisely. That image is a distortion of something far more sophisticated. What NDE accounts consistently describe is not judgment, it is curriculum design. The life review isn't a courtroom, it's a planning session. Every moment of the life just lived is examined, not for moral scoring, but for what it generated. What did this moment teach? What did this relationship open? What did this failure make possible that success would have foreclosed? The review is an assessment of the curriculum's effectiveness, conducted by the soul itself, in collaboration with the council. Now here is where an ancient tradition enters the picture and makes this undeniable. The Tibetan Bardo Todol, what the West calls the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is not a book about dying. It is a navigational manual for the between-lives state. Compiled by Padmasambhava in the 8th century, and encoded for initiates who had trained specifically to remain conscious through the transition, The Bardo Thodol describes, in precise sequential detail, exactly what the consciousness encounters after physical death. The luminous ground state, the arising of peaceful and wrathful deities, which are not external beings but projections of the consciousness itself, recognized or misrecognized, depending on the soul's preparation. And then, crucially, the council process. The weighing, the review, the deliberation over the conditions of the next incarnation. This is not primitive mythology. This is a mapped mechanism. The Tibetan masters spent lifetimes training to navigate it consciously. The mystery schools of Egypt and Greece trained their initiates in the same territory using different language. The Akashic records, the concept appearing in Hindu cosmology, in theosophy, in the documented research of Edgar Cayce, function as the soul's planning database. Every experience, every agreement, every unresolved thread from every incarnation, stored and accessible in the between-lives state. The council doesn't improvise, it consults the record. It identifies what remains incomplete. And then it begins to design the next curriculum. Robert Schwartz's subjects, regressed into the between-lives state through deep hypnosis, describe this process with a specificity that is difficult to dismiss. They describe choosing parents, not randomly, but strategically, for the exact wounds and gifts those parents carry. They describe selecting the timing of entry into the body. They describe negotiating with other souls, souls who will play antagonists, catalysts, mirrors, and those souls agreeing, out of love, to play roles that will cause pain. Because the pain is the mechanism, the difficulty is the point. The Soul Council isn't arranging a comfortable life. It is engineering a precise set of conditions for maximum expansion. And here is the decode move that reframes every hard thing you have ever lived through. The person who hurt you most may be one of your oldest soul allies, fulfilling a contract they agreed to before either of you arrived. The illness, the rupture, the years of grinding difficulty, these may be the exact curriculum your soul specified, because your soul could see what those conditions would unlock. You didn't wander into your life, you architected it, with full awareness. With collaborators, in a chamber that exists outside of time, where the soul's intelligence operates without the veil that makes embodied life feel random. The Bardo Thodol calls the veil the cloud of unknowing. The Gnostic texts call it the forgetting. Every tradition that mapped this territory acknowledged the same mechanism. The soul enters incarnation without conscious access to the plan, because the plan only works if it's lived from the inside, without the answer key. The forgetting isn't a flaw, it's a feature. The curriculum requires genuine experience, genuine uncertainty, genuine stakes, genuine grief, to produce what it was designed to produce. But here's what the traditions almost never tell you, and this is the piece that pulls the entire architecture into a different light. The contracts negotiated in that council chamber, they are binding, but they are not unbreakable. There is a mechanism, documented in Schwartz's research, encoded in the mystery school transmissions, and accessible to you right now, by which a soul in incarnation can consciously renegotiate the terms. The veil is real, but it is thinner than you were taught. And what lies on the other side of it is not just memory, it is agency. There is a layer beneath the blueprint, beneath the soul's architecture, beneath the council deliberations, beneath the careful mapping of lessons and relationships, there is the contract layer, and this is where the design gets intimate. This is where the abstract becomes personal. A soul contract isn't a legal document. It isn't a passive agreement you signed and forgot. It is an active, living architecture of chosen experience, and it runs through every significant encounter, every devastating loss, every inexplicable connection you have ever felt with another human being. So here is the question that stops most people cold. If I chose this pain before I was born, if the trauma was scripted, then what does that make me? It makes you the architect, not the victim, the architect. Robert Schwartz spent years conducting hypnotic regressions and between-life sessions, and what he documented across dozens of subjects confirmed something that overturns the entire framework of modern suffering. Trauma, in the pre-birth planning model, is not random misfortune. It is a scripted ignition sequence. It is the precise pressure needed to crack open a specific capacity within you that could not have been reached any other way. Schwartz was explicit about this. Free will, in his documented sessions, does not operate outside the pre-birth framework. It operates within it. The soul designs the terrain. Then it chooses, moment by moment, how to move through that terrain. The contract sets the stage. Your choices write the performance. This isn't a fringe idea buried in New Age literature. The CIA Gateway process, the declassified research program that explored out-of-body states and non-physical consciousness, confirmed the existence of a planning architecture that precedes physical incarnation. The report, formally titled Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process, documented that consciousness operates outside the body.
Before we continue, some of what I've learned simply never makes it onto YouTube. That's why we have Insights Academy, a free newsletter where I go deeper into hidden knowledge, ancient wisdom, metaphysics, and the nature of consciousness. The knowledge we don't share in these videos. And when you sign up, you'll receive the Kabbalion as a welcome gift. You'll find it through the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on your screen. I'll give you a moment to do that.
And that the structure of individual experience appears to be non-randomly organized. A government intelligence agency, declassified, sitting in the public record, confirming what the ancient traditions have been encoding for millennia, and the ancient traditions were precise. The Vedic framework didn't just acknowledge past lives, it gave you a mechanism. Vasanas, the subtle impressions left by incomplete karmic cycles, are what drive contract design. When a soul exits a lifetime with unresolved emotional patterns, those patterns become the blueprint material for the next agreement. The incompleteness isn't a failure, it is the fuel. The soul doesn't return to suffer, it returns to complete. And it designs the contracts that will create the exact conditions for completion. Consider what this meant for entire civilizations. The ancient Egyptians encoded this understanding into the weighing of the heart ceremony. The soul, upon death, had its heart weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of cosmic order and truth. What was being measured was not sin in the modern religious sense. It was the degree of completion. How much of the contract had been fulfilled, how much remained. The judgment wasn't punishment, it was assessment. And the assessment informed the next design. Now, here is the decode move that changes how you read your own life. Every activation point you have lived through, every moment of crisis, every relationship that broke you open, every door that slammed shut just as you reached for it. Those weren't obstacles to your purpose. They were your purpose arriving, on schedule, in the exact form that was required. The soul doesn't choose comfortable circumstances to grow. It chooses precise ones, and precision sometimes looks like devastation from the inside. The contract isn't cruel, it is surgical. The difference between those two things is the frame you carry when you encounter the blade. Schwartz documented cases where souls specifically chose parents who would be emotionally unavailable, not to suffer abandonment, but to develop an interior life of extraordinary depth that would eventually become the gift they offered the world. The wound and the gift were the same event, seen from different distances. You are probably already mapping this onto something in your own history. That's not coincidence. That's the recognition mechanism activating. The contract doesn't just exist in the pre-birth realm. It leaves fingerprints everywhere. And here is what the contract layer reveals that the blueprint level alone cannot show you. The blueprint is the map. The contracts are the relationships between all the travelers on the same map. You didn't design your life alone. You designed it in collaboration with other souls who agreed to play specific roles, some of them extraordinarily difficult roles, because the love between souls at that level of planning is beyond what language in this dimension can fully hold. The soul who became your greatest wound may have been your closest companion in the planning room. Actually, no. Let me say that again. The soul who hurt you most may have loved you enough, at the pre-birth level, to agree to be the instrument of your most necessary becoming. That is not a comfortable idea. It is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to be true. But here's what the contract layer still hasn't told you. The contracts are designed. The activation points are mapped. The collaborators are chosen. And then, there is the moment of entry. The moment the soul crosses the threshold and the plan becomes flesh. And that moment changes everything. Because something happens at the crossing. Something is sealed. Something is hidden. And understanding what that is the next layer. Now we reach the threshold itself. The moment of crossing. The layer where the entire pre-birth architecture, the blueprint, the council, the contracts, the activation points, all of it encounters the one event that changes the nature of the game entirely. Incarnation. Sadhguru has spoken about this with a specificity that most spiritual teachers avoid. The soul, in his framework, does not enter the body at the moment of conception. The process of soul integration begins approximately 42 to 48 days after conception. This is not an instantaneous event. It is a gradual tuning, a frequency being drawn into a biological instrument that is still being constructed. The soul doesn't drop into the body like a stone into water. It enters the way music enters a room, slowly, filling the space. Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar offered a complementary image that is worth sitting with. The body, he described, is not the soul's prison. It is its instrument, a boombox, his word, through which the soul's frequency is made audible in the physical world. The body doesn't contain the soul. It manifests it, projects it, broadcasts it into the material dimension. So what happens at the moment of full integration? The veil descends. And here is the question that sits at the center of every mystical tradition on earth. Why would a soul design an elaborate pre-birth plan, a blueprint, a council, a set of contracts, a series of activation points, and then cross into a body that will forget all of it? Why engineer the forgetting? Because the forgetting is not a flaw in the system. The forgetting is the system. Sovereignty requires the veil. If you arrived in this lifetime with full conscious memory of every contract you signed, every lesson you designed, every activation point you scheduled, you would not live the experience. You would observe it. And observation is not transformation. The soul doesn't incarnate to watch, it incarnates to become. And becoming requires not knowing. It requires the genuine encounter with uncertainty. It requires you to choose, without the cheat sheet, in real time, and discover through that choosing who you actually are at the level of character, not just design. The veil is not cruelty. It is the condition that makes the experiment valid. Robert Schwartz's documented research maps something even more astonishing. The soul's incarnation window is not randomly assigned. Within what he describes as a vast cycle of soul evolution, a cycle spanning what some traditions encode as thousands of years of developmental time, your soul chose this exact window, this precise historical moment. This particular convergence of collective human experience and individual soul curriculum, you didn't arrive now by accident. You chose now with intention. And the reasons are embedded in the contract architecture you designed before crossing the threshold. Ancient Egypt encoded this understanding into the ritual of the opening of the mouth, the ceremony performed on the body of the deceased to restore the senses that the soul would need in the next life. They understood that incarnation was a transition of perception, that what you could access on one side of the veil was different from what you could access on the other, and the ceremony was designed to ensure the soul carried as much capacity as possible across the crossing. Now here is the decode move. The veil is real, but it is not absolute, and this is the piece that most people miss entirely. The forgetting is complete at the level of explicit memory. You do not remember the planning room, you do not remember the council, you do not remember the contracts you signed. But the body remembers. The nervous system remembers. The pattern of what draws you, what repels you, what breaks you open, what restores you, all of that is the plan expressing itself through the instrument of your biology. Your intuition isn't random. It is the blueprint speaking in the only language available to it on this side of the veil. When something feels like recognition, a place, a person, a piece of music, an idea that is not sentimentality, that is the contract activating. That is the plan sending you a signal through the only channel it has access to, resonance. You have been receiving these signals your entire life. You have probably called them coincidence, or gut feeling, or inexplicable knowing. They are none of those things. They are the plan, communicating through the instrument it designed for exactly this purpose. The veil creates the game. But remembering the plan is how you start to play it consciously. And that is the real awakening, not the dramatic dissolution of ego in a single mystical moment. The real awakening is the gradual recognition that the life you are living was designed by a version of you that loved you enough to build in everything you would need, even the things that looked, from inside the veil, like everything going wrong. Yet what remains, and this is where we go next, is the question of what you do with that recognition. Because knowing the plan existed is one thing. Reclaiming your role as its author is another thing entirely. Here is the sovereignty payoff. The moment you see the plan, truly see it, you stop being a victim of your circumstances. Full stop. Every obstacle reframes. Every loss recontextualizes. Every wound reveals itself as a deliberate activation point, placed there by a version of you that was operating from a level of love and intelligence that this dimension can barely hold. You didn't stumble through your life. You moved through a design, and the designer was you. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your soul contract insights in the comments below. What activation point in your life just reframed itself? Your reflections don't just help you, they add layers to this conversation that I genuinely cannot generate alone. The deeper curriculum on consciousness mechanics, the architecture of the between-life state, the mechanics of the veil, the full initiation into pre-birth sovereignty, that continues right here on this channel. Stay with this. You didn't stumble onto this video. The plan sent you. Drop your soul contract insight in the comments. Subscribe. The next layer of the curriculum is already waiting. You were always the author, never the accident.